The stars outside the viewport burned like cold fire, distant and untouchable. Malik Carter stood in restraints of translucent metal, the light of a dying nebula reflecting across his skin. Around him, silence. Even the hum of the Imperial Ark Vareth seemed to hesitate, as if the ship itself feared the judgment of its masters. Malik had been silent for hours. The guards, sleek, tall Varine soldiers with skin like obsidian glass, didn't speak to him. They didn't need to. To them he was human, fragile, impulsive, beneath words. He stared through the crystal wall, thinking of Earth, or what was left of it. The oceans were gone, the soil too poisoned to bear fruit. Humanity had scattered among the stars, surviving where it could, adapting, resisting. For a while Malik had believed resistance meant fire and rebellion. Now standing in a cage of light, he wondered if it meant endurance instead. A chime rang. The chamber doors unfolded like petals. An officer entered, flanked by 2 attendants in silver robes. Her scales shimmered faintly with blue light, a Varine noble unmistakable. "Malik Carter of the Human Rebellion," she said, her voice smooth and sharp like ice breaking. "You are summoned before Duchess Vishara of the Varine Dominion. Your fate has been decided." He didn't move. "And what is that fate today?" She tilted her head, studying him as if he were an insect pressed beneath glass. "You are to be joined in genetic and political union with Her Excellency. The Empress decrees that your union will symbolize the submission of humanity and the mercy of the Empire." Malik laughed quietly. "Marriage. That's what you call mercy now?" One of the guards stepped forward, but the officer raised her hand. "Silence is advised, human. The Duchess is not known for tolerance." "I've dealt with worse than intolerance," Malik said. "What's she like, this Duchess of yours?" The officer's gaze flickered. "Cold, efficient, unforgiving. She will not find you suitable." "Then maybe we'll get along," Malik said. They led him through corridors that shimmered with bioluminescent veins, the ship alive with alien design. The walls pulsed faintly, breathing. The scent of ozone and strange metal filled the air. Everywhere he looked, Varine eyes followed him. Curious, contemptuous, cautious. The chamber of judgment was vast, cathedral-like, its ceiling a projection of the galaxy itself. At its center stood a dais of crystalline spires. Upon it, Duchess Vishara waited. Her presence was overwhelming, tall, elegant, wrapped in robes of pale gold that caught the starlight. Her eyes, silver and unblinking, held a stillness that felt colder than space itself. "So," she said softly, "this is the human who dared ignite rebellion." Malik met her gaze. "And you're the Duchess who thinks a crown makes her untouchable." A whisper rippled through the chamber. Vishara's expression didn't change. "Your courage is either admirable or suicidal, perhaps both." "Tell me, Malik Carter, what do humans feel when they face extinction?" He smiled faintly. "We remember who we came from." That answer lingered, and for a fraction of a second, something flickered behind her calm. Interest, perhaps, or irritation. She turned away. "Prepare him for the ceremony. The Empress demands it be completed before the next orbital cycle." The guards pulled him back. Malik resisted the urge to speak again. His heart beat steady, slow. He knew what this was, an act of humiliation disguised as diplomacy. But he also knew something they didn't. Every chain ever made could break. As they dragged him down the corridor, the stars outside the viewport seemed closer now, almost listening. The voice of his mother echoed in his memory, the rhythm of her words older than any empire. "Boy, they can take your freedom, but not your fire. Never let them touch your soul." He closed his eyes and held that fire tight. Because deep down, Malik Carter knew one truth the Varine could never comprehend. No empire lasts forever. And somewhere beyond those walls of light, destiny was waiting to test that truth. Before the story of Malik's impossible fate unfolds, make sure you're here to witness how one man's humanity can rewrite an empire. Subscribe and follow his path through the chains of starlight. Duchess Vishara of House Varine stood before the mirror of Continuum, her reflection divided into 1,000 shards of cold light. Each fragment showed her as she was meant to be, flawless, composed, perfect. Yet, beneath the symmetry of her features, a faint tremor flickered, a whisper of something she could not name. The attendants moved silently around her, adjusting the folds of her ceremonial robes, polishing the delicate ridges of her crown. The air was sterile, perfumed with the faint scent of crystalline dust. Every gesture was ritualized, precise, as if emotion itself were a contamination. A soft chime echoed. "Your Grace," an attendant said, voice hushed. "The human has arrived." For a moment she said nothing. The words lingered in the chamber like a faint discord in a perfect melody. "Has the Empress confirmed the decree?" "Yes, Your Grace. The union is sealed by royal command." Vishara turned away from the mirror. "Then it is not a union, it is a sentence." She descended the marble-like steps, her movements sharp as blades. Her eyes, silver, luminous, inhuman, betrayed no warmth. Yet beneath the surface her mind burned with quiet resentment. To be bound to a human prisoner was an insult to her house, a mockery of centuries of purity. Her mother's voice echoed in memory. "A Varine's blood is colder than vacuum. To feel is to falter." But what the Empress commanded, no one refused. Not even her. In the Hall of Judgment, she met her advisors, tall figures draped in ceremonial cloaks. Their faces bore no emotion, but she could feel their judgment like static in the air. "Your Grace," one of them began, "for the record, this alliance is a necessity. The human population on Epsilon Prime grows restless. Their leader's captivity is a symbol. His assimilation will—" "End their hope," Vishara interrupted. "Yes, I understand the logic. I simply question the dignity. The Empress believes your strength will preserve it." "Strength," she repeated, the word hollow on her tongue. Her gaze shifted toward the distant chamber where the human awaited. She had seen his record, a soldier, a revolutionary, a man who refused to kneel. His file described him as volatile, impulsive, dangerously persuasive, the kind of creature her people despised. Yet in the holoscan image, his eyes had held something alien even to her kind, defiance wrapped in sorrow, a spark unbroken by defeat. She dismissed the thought. Curiosity was weakness. When the time came, the ceremonial doors parted. 2 guards escorted Malik Carter inside. He was unchained now, though the cuffs still glowed faintly around his wrists. He walked with quiet steadiness, his gaze sweeping across the chamber, taking in the alien grandeur without awe. So this was the human, she thought, flesh and heat and defiance. He bowed slightly, not out of respect but as acknowledgement. "Your Grace," he said, voice low but clear. "They told me you wanted to meet your new husband." A ripple of amusement passed through the council, but Vishara's expression did not change. "You misunderstand, human. I do not want anything. I am commanded." "Must be nice," Malik said, "having your whole life decided for you and still calling it honor." She studied him. "You speak as if you know honor." "I know chains," he replied. "And what happens when people mistake obedience for strength." For a heartbeat, silence filled the room. The guards stiffened, waiting for her command to silence him. But Vishara raised her hand slightly, halting them. Something in his voice, calm, grounded, utterly human, pressed against the frozen shell of her discipline. She turned away. "Remove him." The ceremony begins at dawn. As Malik was led from the hall, Vishara remained still, watching the shimmer of the starlight across the floor. Her mind should have been composed, her pulse steady. Instead, it beat once, too loud, too slow. She whispered to herself, "Emotion is decay." And yet, for the first time in her long, disciplined life, the Duchess of Ice wondered if decay might feel like warmth. Somewhere in the silence between thoughts, a question formed, a dangerous, forbidden one. What if the human's fire could not be contained? The union was not a celebration. It was a verdict dressed in ritual. The Hall of Vows glowed with pale light, filled with the silent presence of Varine nobles and imperial clerics. Their eyes reflected no curiosity, no judgment, only the cold precision of obedience. Malik Carter stood at the center, surrounded by a language of symbols he didn't understand. His cuffs had been removed, but the invisible weight of captivity clung to him. He felt the eyes of the alien court trace the lines of his dark skin, analyzing, assessing, reducing him to an artifact of failure. The Duchess entered in silence, her movements deliberate, her every step a lesson in restraint. The light caught her metallic skin, shimmering with hues of gold and frost. She did not look at Malik as she approached the altar. She looked past him, as though he were a shadow cast by something inconvenient. The officiant, a towering priest of the Order of Continuum, spoke in a voice that vibrated the air. By decree of the Empress, the union of the Verine and the human is hereby consecrated. Their bond is to symbolize peace through subjugation, harmony through control. Malik's jaw tightened. "Peace through subjugation," he muttered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. But Vishara's gaze flicked toward him for the briefest second, a flash of warning, or perhaps curiosity. He met her eyes, unflinching. "Guess we'll make quite the picture," he said under his breath. Her voice, low and even, answered without turning. "How you will speak when spoken to, human. I'm not sure that's ever been my strength." The officiant extended a crystalline ring, sharp, almost weightless. It wasn't meant for comfort. When Vishara placed it on his finger, its edges stung faintly, drawing a thin line of blood. The red drop glimmered against the pale light, foreign and vivid. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Malik saw it, the subtle recoil in the nobles' faces, the discomfort at the sight of human blood. Vishara's hand trembled just slightly, then steadied. "Your essence is unstable," the priest intoned, "but the bond is sealed." Vishara turned away before the final vow was spoken. Her voice was cold, but her tone carried a strange weight. "Take him to his quarters." "Separate chambers," Malik smiled faintly. "Didn't think we were starting the honeymoon tonight." Her gaze cut through him like glass. "You misunderstand. There will be no night. Only silence." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Her words carried the certainty of a sentence, but he had already learned that silence could be a weapon sharper than speech. The guards led him through winding corridors. The air grew colder, the lights dimmer, until he reached a chamber of polished black stone. No bed, only a metallic slab. No window, only a faint glow pulsing from the ceiling like a distant heartbeat. He sat on the slab and let his thoughts wander. He remembered Earth, the rust-red skies, the scent of dust and oil, the music that rose from the ruins like defiance. He remembered his grandmother's voice, telling him that rhythm could outlast empires. He began to hum, softly, almost unconsciously, a slow, aching melody that carried the weight of centuries, of chains broken and rebuilt, of prayers whispered in the dark. The sound filled the sterile chamber, clashing with the stillness around him. Somewhere beyond the walls, Vishara paused. The faint vibration of that human rhythm brushed the edges of her composure. It was dissonant, impure, and yet something in it stirred. She closed her eyes, willing it away. "Noise," she whispered to herself. "Only noise." But the sound lingered long after the silence returned. In the stillness of the Empire's heart, Malik Carter's song became the first ripple of something unmeasured, an echo that would not die quietly. Malik didn't sleep that night. The chamber was too cold, too quiet, too calculated. Every sound, the hiss of circulating air, the pulse of distant machinery, felt like the measured heartbeat of something that wasn't alive. He sat upright on the metallic slab, tracing the small cut left by the ceremonial ring. The blood had dried now, leaving only a faint mark, but it reminded him that he was still human, still warm, still real. He began humming again. Not a song this time, but a rhythm. Steady, deep, the kind of beat that came from the body rather than the mind. The vibrations carried through the floor, soft but persistent. The sound didn't belong in a place like this, and maybe that was the point. Somewhere above, a sensor blinked. In the observation chamber, Duchess Vishara watched him through a translucent screen. She had been awake since the ceremony ended, her thoughts restless and unwelcome. The human was an anomaly, a disruption in the elegant stillness of her world, yet she couldn't look away. "Your Grace," her aide murmured from behind, "shall I mute the surveillance feed?" Vishara didn't respond at first. The low hum seemed to vibrate through the glass, brushing against the air around her. "No, let it play." "As you command." The aide left in silence, and Vishara remained alone. She watched Malik's movements, his shoulders swaying slightly, the rhythm building with slow, deliberate persistence. It had no structure, no logic, no reason. But it moved, and that movement, that defiance of silence, stirred something within her she did not understand. Her fingers twitched unconsciously against the edge of the console. The rhythm carried a strange resonance. It wasn't just noise, it was alive. Malik, unaware he had an audience, closed his eyes. The rhythm deepened, transformed into a quiet hum that turned into words, soft, nearly whispered. Bound but breathing, lost but burning, still here. He didn't know why he spoke. Maybe because silence was the first step toward surrender, and he had nothing left to surrender. His grandmother's words echoed in his memory, how music had been the language of those who had nothing else. It wasn't just about melody, it was survival. It was the memory of hands clapping on wood floors, of voices rising over chains, of a people who refused to vanish. "Still here," he said again, louder this time. Vishara felt the phrase echo through the speakers, the words vibrating with an unfamiliar energy. Her people did not use sound this way. To them, communication was precision, stripped of emotion. This was raw, undisciplined, and yet it felt powerful. Her breath caught and she turned off the feed abruptly. The silence that followed was unbearable. Down below, Malik smiled faintly to himself. He didn't know if anyone could hear him, but he didn't care. The rhythm wasn't for them. It was for himself. It was a reminder that his soul still belonged to no empire. Time passed. Minutes. Maybe hours. He leaned against the cold wall, tapping the rhythm softly now. A heartbeat against the void. For the first time since his capture, the cold seemed a little less cruel. In her private chamber, Vishara stood before the mirror of continuum once more. The light reflected her face perfectly, but she couldn't stop hearing the echo of that human sound, a vibration that refused to fade. "What is this weakness?" she whispered. The reflection didn't answer, but the silence around her felt heavier than before. For the first time in her life, the stillness of the empire didn't feel like peace, it felt like suffocation. Somewhere in the labyrinth of the Varith, a human heartbeat continued to tap against the quiet walls, steady and unbroken. It was the rhythm beneath the ice, faint but alive, a pulse that neither chains nor silence could kill. And though neither of them knew it yet, that rhythm had already begun to change them both. Vishara had not planned to return to the observation chamber, yet she found herself standing before the console again, the faint light from the monitors washing over her golden skin. The feed displayed the human's quarters, still empty, cold. For a moment, she thought he had fallen silent. Then the faint sound returned, that low hum pulsing with rhythm, human and unrefined. She had muted the sound hours ago, yet now she unsealed the audio feed. The vibration filled the chamber immediately, subtle and imperfect, but steady, alive. It disturbed her. No Virene would ever express themselves this way. Emotion, sound, rhythm, these were tools of chaos. Her people valued symmetry, stillness, and logic, but this human, this prisoner, broke those laws effortlessly. She listened. His rhythm carried something she couldn't quantify. It lacked pattern, yet it moved. It was like energy refusing to die. Her aide entered quietly. "Your Grace, the Council requests your report on the human." "Later," she said without looking away. "Forgive me, but they insist." "Later." The aide hesitated, then bowed and left. The door sealed behind him, leaving Vishara alone with the rhythm. On the screen, Malik sat cross-legged, tapping against the floor. His eyes were closed, his expression distant, but not broken. There was peace in his defiance. When he began to hum softly, her breath caught. "Still here," he murmured. "Still breathing." "Still me." The words echoed through the chamber. Vishara touched the console as if she could feel the sound through her fingertips. The phrase carried no threat, yet it unsettled her more than any act of rebellion. Still here. Her people had erased entire civilizations, absorbed countless cultures, crushed resistance wherever it rose. Yet here was one man, stripped of power and name, declaring his existence as if it were victory itself. The Duchess frowned. "Primitive," she whispered, though the word felt weak even as she said it. "He clings to sound like a child to superstition." Still, she didn't turn off the feed. She studied the subtle movement of his shoulders, the way his body followed the rhythm, creating something between music and heartbeat. It had no purpose in Vereen terms, but its persistence, its refusal to conform, drew her in. Her reflection appeared in the console glass beside his image. For the first time she noticed how still she was compared to him. Her posture flawless, her breathing measured, her expression carved from discipline. And yet, beside his restless humanity, she looked less alive. A thought crossed her mind before she could stop it. When was the last time I felt anything at all? The question unsettled her. Vishara stepped back, her voice low. "He will be examined tomorrow. I will determine whether this sound has any cognitive effect." But she didn't call for guards, she didn't order silence. She simply stood there listening. Below, Malik opened his eyes. As if sensing her presence, he looked toward the camera, straight through it, through her, through the distance between species. He spoke softly. "You listening up there?" Vishara froze. "Don't worry," he said. "You don't have to answer. I get it. Silence is safer." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that belonged to someone who'd lost everything but refused to lose himself. "Just remember," he said, "silence don't last forever." The hum deepened again, the rhythm slower now, measured, patient, inevitable. Vishara reached for the console controls but didn't press anything. Her hand lingered over the mute icon, trembling once before pulling back. In the silence that followed, the rhythm seemed louder than before, echoing through her mind like a pulse she couldn't ignore. When she finally turned away, her reflection in the dark glass looked different. Not flawed, not broken, just less certain. And for the first time in her life, Duchess Vishara wondered if the sound she had tried to suppress might be the only thing still alive in her world. Vishara ordered the guards to bring the human to her private chamber the next morning. She told herself it was for evaluation, an inquiry into his behavior, a test of his stability. But the truth was heavier, quieter, and she refused to name it. The hum he had created still echoed faintly in her thoughts, a rhythm that refused to fade. Malik entered without fear. His wrists were free now, though the guards stayed close. He looked around, taking in the elegant precision of the room, the clean geometry, the metallic air, the light that shifted like ice. "Nice place," he said. "A little cold, though." Vishara regarded him with measured stillness. "Temperature is optimal for concentration. Warmth dulls the senses." He smiled. "Guess that explains a lot." Her gaze sharpened. "You think yourself clever, human?" "I think myself alive," he replied evenly. "That's usually enough." Vishara gestured for the guards to wait outside. The door sealed behind them, leaving a silence thick enough to feel. "You are bold for someone in chains." "Chains don't scare me," Malik said. "Silence does." "Silence," she repeated, tilting her head. "Your kind fills every void with sound. Is it fear that drives you to make noise?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe sound reminds us we still exist." Her silver eyes studied him as if dissecting a paradox. "Existence is not defined by expression. It is defined by purpose." "And what's your purpose, Duchess?" he asked. "To keep pretending you don't feel anything?" The air between them tightened. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not an equal, not even the Empress herself. Vishara straightened, her voice sharp as glass. "You presume much, prisoner." "I don't presume," Malik said. "I notice. Then notice this, she said. Emotion is corruption. It clouds reason. It weakens order. My people eradicated it to survive. He took a slow breath. You call that survival? Sounds more like extinction. Her lips parted slightly, but no answer came. He stepped closer, enough for his warmth to touch the cold air around her. You ever wonder what it feels like to let something move you, not control you, not threaten you, but just move you? Bishara's composure faltered for a fraction of a second. The rhythm of his words carried that same pulse she had heard in his hum, an unspoken beat that made her chest tighten. Your kind mistakes chaos for freedom, she said quietly. We mastered ourselves long ago. And in mastering yourselves, what did you lose? The question lingered, unanswered. Her throat felt dry. Malik took another step forward. I don't hate you, he said. I don't even hate this empire. I just hate what happens when power forgets to feel. Her eyes flickered with something unrecognizable, fear, curiosity, or maybe both. You speak as if you know what power is. I know what it isn't, Malik said. It isn't control. It's choice. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't sterile or oppressive. It was alive, charged, trembling with something dangerous. Finally, Vishara turned away, her voice low. You will cease your expressions. They disturb the equilibrium of this vessel. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, he said. She faced him again, her expression unreadable. You are an anomaly, Malik Carter. I will understand you, and when I do, I will end whatever it is that makes you different. He smiled faintly. You can study me all you want, Duchess, but the thing that makes me different, you can't dissect it. She watched him leave, her pulse unsteady for the first time in memory. When the door closed, the silence that followed wasn't comforting, it was suffocating. And though she told herself it was nothing, deep down Vishara knew the human had already breached a wall no one had ever touched before. The council chamber of the Vereen Empire was carved from translucent stone, lit from within by shifting blue light that pulsed like a frozen heartbeat. Duchess Vishara stood before the High Council, her posture flawless, her expression composed. Yet beneath that composure, something restless moved, a pulse she could neither silence nor understand. The eldest councillor, High Seer Kareth, spoke first. Your behavior toward the human has been noted, Duchess. You have granted him private audience twice without supervision. Explain this deviation. It was necessary, she replied. Observation requires proximity. He is unpredictable. Unpredictable, Kareth repeated, his tone cold, and yet alive. Most humans broken by captivity are compliant. He sings, he questions, he resists. Do you allow this to continue? He is valuable for study, Vishara said, her voice controlled. His defiance reveals the structure of his species' will. To understand it is to control it. Another councillor leaned forward. Control is achieved through suppression, not conversation. You risk contamination, Your Grace. Vishara's eyes flicked toward him. Contamination? From sound? The room shifted. For a heartbeat, silence thickened. Then Kareth spoke again. Not from sound, from emotion. That word, emotion, hung in the air like a forbidden relic. The chamber dimmed as if the very walls recoiled from it. Vishara lowered her gaze. My discipline is intact. Kareth's voice softened, almost pitying. Even ice cracks under pressure, child. The Empress watches closely. Do not forget your purpose. She bowed her head, the gesture slow and deliberate. I serve the Empire. When the meeting ended, she walked the long corridor alone. Her reflection followed her in the mirrored walls, tall, regal, untouchable. Yet, in her reflection's eyes, she saw something she didn't recognize, uncertainty. The thought unsettled her more than any reprimand could. Later, in the isolation of her chamber, she replayed the recording of her last encounter with Malik. His words echoed through the room. And in mastering yourselves, what did you lose? She had dismissed the question then, but now it lingered, gnawing quietly at the edges of her composure. When the communication alert sounded, she hesitated before answering. The holographic image of her aide appeared. "Your Grace, the human's behavior has drawn attention. The Council considers termination. They deem his presence a liability." Her body tensed. "On whose authority?" "The Empress herself. A formal order will follow by next cycle." Vishara's mind went still. For reasons she could not articulate, the thought of Malik Carter, silenced, erased, filled her with unease. It should have been relief. Instead, it felt like loss. "Delay the order," she said. "Your Grace?" "Tell them the human's psychological degradation is incomplete. His removal would compromise the experiment. I will assume full responsibility." The aide hesitated. "As you command." When the connection ended, she remained still. The decision she had just made was reckless, perhaps treasonous, yet beneath the fear, she felt something else, a strange clarity. Hours later, she stood again before the observation console. Malik sat in his chamber, quiet now, his hands resting loosely on his knees. His eyes were closed, but his lips moved slightly, forming words she couldn't hear. She increased the audio feed. His voice drifted through, soft, rhythmic, deliberate. "You can cage a body, not a soul." The simplicity of it struck her harder than any speech. She pressed her hand to the glass, not realizing she was mirroring his gesture. For the first time in her life, Duchess Vishara questioned whether silence was truly strength, or merely fear disguised as discipline. She whispered, almost against her will, "Why can't I silence you?" The screen flickered, but he didn't hear. He kept humming that same steady rhythm, the pulse that refused to die. And as it filled the cold chamber, Vishara felt something shift inside her. Small, imperceptible, but irreversible. The first fracture in the ice. The grand hall of Virene Prime was filled with silence, so absolute it felt alive. Rows of nobles stood beneath towering spires of light, their expressions carved from stone, their minds united in judgment. Duchess Vishara walked among them with the calm precision of a blade. Every movement, every breath was an act of control, and beside her, bound by duty and decree, walked Malik Carter, the human symbol of submission. He wore the ceremonial robe they had given him, though it hung awkwardly against his frame, stitched with alien symbols he didn't understand. The crowd's eyes followed his every step, dissecting his existence. Whispers rippled like static through the hall. He should not stand beside her. He contaminates her presence. An animal dressed in silk. Malik heard them all. He didn't flinch. "Your people really know how to throw a party," he muttered. Vishara's voice was soft but sharp. "Do not speak." "Why not?" "Everyone else is." She ignored him, focusing on the ceremony's cadence. The High Seer's voice echoed through the hall. "Today marks the first union between the superior and the lesser, a symbol of mercy and dominion." The words pressed against Malik's chest like weight. He turned slightly toward her. "That what this is to you, mercy?" Her expression didn't change. "It is duty. Feels like a funeral. Perhaps for your pride," he smiled faintly, "or maybe for your empire." That made her glance at him, just a flicker of movement, quick and uncertain. Around them, the crowd hissed in disapproval. The High Seer raised a hand, demanding silence. "The Duchess will now seal the union publicly." The touch of the Virene upon the lesser signifies acceptance. Malik stiffened. He hadn't been told about this part. Vishara hesitated for half a second, a pause so small no one else noticed. But within her, something trembled. She looked at him. His eyes were steady, dark, and human. They held no submission, no hatred, just the kind of defiance that burned without cruelty. For the first time she realized she didn't know how to meet that gaze without losing her balance. "Proceed," the High Seer ordered. Vishara reached out, her hand hovering near his cheek. Her skin was cold, metallic. The gesture was meant to be symbolic, detached, clinical. But something inside her resisted the motion. Malik's voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "Go on. Show them what mercy looks like." Something broke. Her hand didn't just touch his skin, it lingered. and before she could stop herself, she leaned forward and pressed her lips against his. The hall gasped. It wasn't a kiss of ceremony. It wasn't calculated or performative. It was impulsive, human, and in that instant every law of her species shattered. A pulse of light burst through the hall, unseen but felt. Vishara's control fractured like glass under heat. Every nerve in her body ignited. For the first time in her existence she felt warmth, fear, desire, life. Malik stood frozen, his heart pounding. When she pulled back, her pupils dilated, her breath sharp. Around them, chaos spread like fire. Nobles staggered. Some clutched their chests. Others fell to their knees, overcome by emotions they had never known. "What have you done?" whispered the High Seer. Vishara couldn't answer. Her voice was gone. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Malik looked at her, confusion and awe mixing in his face. "Guess that's what happens when you try to touch something real." Guards rushed forward, weapons drawn, the room erupting into disorder. The Empress's sigil flashed above the altar, demanding order, but no one listened. Vishara's hand trembled. Her entire life she had believed emotion was a disease. But now, standing before a hall collapsing under its own awakening, she knew the truth. It wasn't disease, it was revelation, and she had no idea how to survive it. The news of the Duchess's kiss spread through the Orion systems faster than light. On every Vereen world, the image replayed endlessly, the cold-blooded heir of the Empire touching a human, breaking the sacred laws of her species. For a civilization built on suppression, the sight was sacrilege. For others, it was awakening. In the aftermath, the Grand Hall remained in chaos. Nobles had fled or collapsed. Guards stood paralyzed, and the High Seer's voice trembled as he demanded order. Yet Vishara couldn't hear him. Her body burned from within, her pulse erratic. Every breath tasted strange, warm, alive, terrifyingly real. Malik stood beside her, wrists still bound. He could feel the shift in the air. The noble's eyes, once filled with contempt, now reflected confusion and fear. "Looks like your empire's got a heartbeat again," he said quietly. Vishara's voice shook when she answered. "What have you done to me?" "I didn't do anything," Malik said. "You did." She tried to speak, but her words failed. Emotion surged like electricity through her veins, too vast to contain. Anger, sorrow, wonder, all foreign sensations crashing together. For a Vereen it was unbearable. For the first time her control shattered completely. Guards advanced. "Seize the human!" Vishara turned sharply. "No!" The single word carried force enough to halt them. The command reverberated through the hall, instinctive and absolute. The guards froze, confused by the tone, by the emotion lacing her voice. The High Seer stepped forward, eyes wide with horror. "Your Grace, you are infected. Emotion is a contagion. We must contain this now, before it spreads." She straightened, trembling but resolute. "It's not a disease." The crowd gasped. To speak against doctrine was treason. Malik looked at her, seeing the shift, the calm perfection cracking open to reveal something raw beneath. The High Seer turned to the guards. "Restrain them both." They moved again, but Malik acted first. He grabbed the nearest guard's staff, twisting free from the other's grasp. A spark of energy crackled through the room. Vishara's instincts surged, not logic, not training, but something primal. She stepped between Malik and the guards, her voice fierce. "Stand down!" No one moved. No one dared. For a moment everything was still. Then the hall lights flickered, and a tremor ran through the ship itself. Somewhere deep within the Empire's neural core, a signal had fractured. The kiss had not only reached the nobles, it had been broadcast through the psychic lattice that linked every Vereen mind. Across the stars, Vereen citizens began to feel what they had never known: grief, joy, confusion, fear. The entire species stirred under the weight of emotion, awakening like a sleeping giant. The High Seer fell to his knees, clutching his head. "It's spreading," he whispered. "The suppression fields are failing." Vishara's pulse thundered. She felt it too, the Empire unraveling from within. Every Vereen connected to her genetic signature was now exposed to the same crack in control. Her kiss had become a signal, her awakening a virus of feeling. Malik's gaze met hers. "You didn't just change yourself," he said. "You changed them all." Her breath came uneven. "I didn't mean to." "Maybe that's the point." Alarms wailed through the hall. The Empress's voice filled the air, cold, commanding, divine. "Duchess Vishara of House Vereen, you are declared compromised. Submit to containment or face eradication." The words hung between them like a blade. Malik stepped closer. "You've got a choice now. You can let them erase what you just felt, or you can see where it leads." Her eyes glimmered, silver and trembling. For the first time, she didn't know what choice meant. "Come with me," he said. Vishara hesitated, torn between duty and this terrifying new pulse inside her chest. Then, as the first squad of soldiers entered the chamber, she made her decision. She took Malik's hand, and the Empire trembled. The shuttle's engines roared through the void as Malik and Vishara fled the heart of the collapsing empire. Behind them, the once perfect order of the Vereen Dominion dissolved into chaos, cities burning with emotion instead of fire, leaders trembling beneath sensations they could no longer suppress. Every system broadcast panic, confusion, awakening. Vishara sat rigid in the co-pilot's chair, her hands trembling despite her effort to control them. The cold mask she had always worn was gone. Her voice, when it came, was low and unsteady. "They will hunt us until the end of time." Malik stared through the viewport at the streaks of starlight. "Then we better make time count." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You speak as if survival is certain." "Where I'm from, we learn to survive before we learn to hope," he said. "Hope came later. Usually after the worst was over." "Is it over?" He smiled faintly. "Not even close." They fell into silence. The hum of the engines filled the space between them, rhythmic and steady, like the echo of his old songs. For Vishara, the sound no longer felt foreign. It was unsettling, yes, but it reminded her she was alive. When the shuttle broke through the distortion field of the outer colonies, a different kind of light filled the cabin, warm, golden, imperfect. Ahead, a planet came into view. New Timbuktu. Malik exhaled, relief washing over his face. "Home," he said softly. "Or what's left of it." Vishara studied the planet. Unlike the sterile geometry of the Vereen worlds, New Timbuktu glowed with uneven beauty, its cities pulsing with color, its surface marked by rhythm and chaos. "Primitive," she murmured, but the word lacked conviction. "It's human," Malik corrected. "You'll see." The moment they landed, heat wrapped around them, thick, heavy, alive. The air carried the scent of spice and smoke, the sound of drums echoing from distant streets. The people, descendants of those who had fled Earth generations ago, moved with confidence born of survival. Their skin shimmered bronze and black beneath the suns, their laughter rich and defiant. Malik was greeted not with celebration but with suspicion. A group of elders approached, eyes sharp with caution. The oldest among them, a woman named Mother Abini, looked from him to Vishara. "You bring a serpent into our home?" "She's not the enemy," Malik said. "Not anymore." Vishara inclined her head slightly. "Your hostility is noted," she said, her voice precise, formal, an instinct she could not yet unlearn. Mother Abeni's gaze hardened. "We fought her kind for centuries. Their hands built our prisons. Their silence buried our dead." Vishara hesitated. For once she had no defense. "I know," she said quietly. "And if I could undo it, I would." The crowd murmured, uncertain. Abeni studied her for a long moment before turning back to Malik. "You vouch for her?" "With everything I've got," he said. "Then she lives," Abeni said, "but she earns it." Days passed and Vishara learned the rhythms of the colony. The humans here lived by music. The heartbeat of their cities guided their work, their prayer, their unity. She watched them dance beneath the suns, bodies moving like waves, unashamed of their emotion. Malik joined them easily, his laughter blending into the sound of the drums. When he noticed her watching, he called out, "Come on, Duchess. You can't learn life by standing still. I was not made to move like that, she said. He smiled. You weren't made to feel either, but here you are. That night, as the drums faded and the stars rose, Vishara stood beside him, her voice almost a whisper. Your people carry their history in rhythm. My people buried theirs in silence. Maybe that's why we forgot how to live. Malik looked at her, his tone soft. Then maybe this is where you remember. She didn't answer, but for the first time, she wanted to believe him. New Timbuktu woke each morning to sound. Not alarms or commands, but rhythm. The measured thrum of drums echoing across its sunlit streets. To Malik, it was home returning to itself. To Vishara, it was dissonance that slowly began to make sense. Weeks had passed since their arrival. The colony had not fully accepted her. Whispers followed wherever she walked. Children hid behind doorways, their parents muttering warnings. That's the Duchess who kissed a human. Yet curiosity lingered. People watched her as one might watch a storm that refused to end. Malik worked among the engineers, rebuilding communication grids damaged during the last rebellion. He had found purpose again, even in exile, but his mind never left Vishara. Every night, she stood on the terrace overlooking the city, staring at the horizon as if searching for something beyond the stars. One evening, he joined her there. You ever going to talk to them? He asked. They do not want me here, she said, her tone quiet but certain. I am a symbol of everything they lost. Then maybe it's time to change what that symbol means. She looked at him. You think forgiveness is a switch one can simply activate? No, Malik said, but it starts with a song. Her brow furrowed. A song? He smiled. You heard it every day since we landed. You just haven't listened. She turned her gaze toward the city below. The sound of drums carried on the wind, steady, layered, alive. It is disorder. It's connection, he corrected. Each beat means something different, but together they make sense. Kinda like people. Vishara was silent for a long moment. When my people communicate, it is through unity of thought. One signal, one mind. No conflict, no noise. And no soul, Malik said softly. Her gaze sharpened. You believe emotion is the soul. I believe it's the proof of it. The next day, Malik took her into the heart of the colony. The streets were alive with movement, vendors shouting, laughter rising, music flowing like air. The scent of spice and dust filled the heat. He led her to the central square where a group of children played drums, their rhythms imperfect but powerful. Listen, he said. Vishara closed her eyes. At first, the sound overwhelmed her. Each beat was unpredictable, chaotic. But slowly, her mind began to trace the pattern hidden within. It wasn't logic, it was life. Every sound was a voice refusing to disappear. When she opened her eyes, the children had stopped watching her. One of them, a small girl with braids wrapped in copper thread, held out a drum. Try, the girl said. Vishara hesitated. I do not. Try, Malik urged. She took the drum, its surface warm beneath her hands. The children waited. Her first strike was uncertain, the sound sharp and wrong, but Malik nodded. Again. She hit the drum a second time, slower, then a third. The rhythm began to align, not perfect, not elegant, but real. A small smile flickered across her face, quick and unguarded. For the first time, the colony saw her not as a conqueror, but as something else, someone learning how to live. When the day ended, Malik found her standing alone again, this time with the drum beside her. You were right, she said quietly. It is not disorder, it is truth without words. Malik nodded. That's the song of freedom. Doesn't always sound pretty, but it's the only thing worth hearing. Her silver eyes reflected the glow of the sun's. And if your song ends? He looked toward the horizon, the rhythm still pulsing in the distance. Then someone else picks up the beat. For the first time she understood. Freedom wasn't silence broken, it was silence transformed. The peace that had settled over New Timbuktu was fragile, a breath caught between heartbeats. For a few precious weeks, Vishara had begun to feel something she had never known, a quiet belonging. But peace, she realized, was never meant to last for people like them. The first warning came as a distant hum, too low for human ears. Vishara heard it instantly. Her posture stiffened. "They found us." Malik looked up from the work table where he had been repairing a transmitter. "How can you tell?" "The sound," she said. "It's Varine signal frequency. They're close." Within minutes, the sky filled with silver light. Imperial warships pierced the clouds, descending like cold stars. Panic rippled through the colony as alarms screamed. People ran for cover while Malik and the others scrambled to evacuate civilians toward the underground shelters. Vishara turned to him, her voice sharp. "You must leave. They're not here for your people. They're here for me." "Not happening," Malik said. "I didn't fight half a galaxy to start running now. This is not your fight." He looked at her, eyes steady. "It became my fight the moment you stopped pretending you were made of ice." The words hit harder than any weapon. Moments later, the first strike shook the city. Shockwaves tore through the streets, turning glass to dust. Vishara extended her arm, activating the latent power in her bloodline. Energy burst from her palm, creating a shimmering barrier that shielded the square. The humans stared in awe. Malik shouted over the noise, "You can't hold it forever." "I do not need forever," she said. "Only enough." Above them, the Varine flagship hovered, its insignia glowing with the sigil of the Empress herself. A voice echoed through every communicator, cold and absolute. "Duchess Vishara of House Varine, you have violated the continuum. You are stripped of title, command, and honor. Surrender the human and submit to erasure." Vishara's jaw tightened. "They mean to cleanse me." Malik stared upward. "Cleanse?" "They will unmake me," she said, "molecule by molecule. Erase my name from the record." "It is how they destroy what they cannot control." The colony's leaders rushed to Malik. Mother Abeni's voice trembled with urgency. "We can't withstand them. You must decide, her or all of us." Malik met her eyes. "We stand together," she frowned. "You'd risk everything for one alien." He didn't hesitate. "For one person." Vishara turned toward him, something fragile breaking in her voice. "You cannot protect me from what I was born into." "Maybe not," Malik said, "but you showed me that even the coldest empire can crack. Maybe it's time they saw what warmth can do." As the next barrage descended, Vishara stepped forward. Her energy shield pulsed brighter, expanding outward, deflecting the storm. But the effort tore at her body. She staggered, her strength fading. Malik caught her before she fell. "They will not stop," she whispered. "They cannot feel mercy." "Then we'll show them what it looks like." He pressed his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. Around them, the air shimmered with heat. Something passed between them, not power, not energy, but will. When she rose again, her eyes blazed gold. The barrier expanded, transforming into a pulse that spread through the sky. The incoming fleet faltered. The Varine soldiers aboard their ships froze, confusion washing through them as emotion, fear, awe, empathy invaded their minds. The Empress's voice thundered, but her commands went unheard. Her army was unraveling, just as her empire once had. Vishara lowered her hand, trembling. "It's begun," she whispered. Malik looked at her, realization dawning. "You didn't just fight them." "No," she said softly. "I freed them." And as the storm above began to break, both knew there would be no turning back. The sky above New Timbuktu blazed with silver fire. Imperial ships burned in orbit, their formations collapsing as confusion tore through the Varine command network. The pulse unleashed by Vishara had spread faster than any weapon, an invisible storm of feeling that reached through metal and flesh alike. In the command hub, Malik watched the readings flicker across the monitors. "They're falling apart," he said. "Every ship in the sector's losing control." Vishara stood beside him, her face pale but resolute. "Their neural order is failing. The lattice that once bound them to obedience is gone. They are awake." Malik looked at her, the realization dawning. "You didn't just set them free. You broke their entire system." She met his gaze. No, I changed it. The Vereen will never obey in silence again. Outside, the fleet began turning its weapons on itself. Squadrons collided, commanders refused to fire, and soldiers stood paralyzed, overwhelmed by emotion for the first time in their lives. But not all resisted. The Empress's flagship remained intact, its power burning brighter than the rest. A single transmission cut through the chaos, sharp as glass. "Vishara," the Empress's voice filled the air, deep and cold, echoing through every communicator. "You have unleashed contagion. You have poisoned the order that preserved us for millennia. Surrender, or I will purge this world." Vishara took a step forward, her voice calm but steady. "You can't purge what has already awakened." The Empress's tone hardened. "Then you will watch it burn." Above the colony, the flagship's core weapon began to charge, gathering light until the clouds turned white. Malik grabbed her arm. "She'll kill everyone here. You've got to stop her." Vishara closed her eyes. "If I connect to her mind, she will destroy me." "Then don't connect," he said. "Reach her another way." She looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her silver eyes. "There is no other way among my kind." "There is," Malik said quietly. "You showed me once." With a kiss. The memory flashed through her like a spark in the dark. His warmth, his defiance, the way it had broken her control. It was madness. It was impossible. But it had worked once before. "I will need a signal," she said. Malik turned to the engineers. "Patch her through, every frequency, every ship." They hesitated. Mother Abeni stepped forward, her expression fierce. "Do it." "Let them hear." The transmission engaged. Across the stars, every Vereen felt her presence, a pulse of consciousness blooming in their minds. Vishara's voice filled the network, not with command, but with emotion. "My people," she said, "we were taught that silence is strength, that order is purity. But silence was our cage. Feel what you are. Feel what they told you to forget." Her words carried warmth and pain, merging with the pulse Malik had taught her to hear, the rhythm of life itself. The soldiers in orbit froze, their weapons lowering as confusion turned to wonder. The pulse spread faster, binding them not by control but by choice. The Empress roared in fury. "You corrupt everything!" "No," Vishara said, her voice breaking. "I free it." The light around the flagship flared to unbearable brightness. Malik shouted, "It's going to fire!" Vishara turned toward him, tears burning her eyes for the first time. "Then let it see who we've become." She reached for him, her hand finding his. Their connection sparked, a surge of emotion so strong it cut through the storm. The energy wave that had once bound the Empire now turned against itself, refracting into brilliance. The beam fired, and the sky erupted into flame. When the light faded, silence followed, not cold, but alive. Across the Orion systems, the Vereen woke into a world remade by feeling, and two figures stood at the heart of its fire. Smoke still veiled the sky above New Timbuktu, a haze of silver ash drifting where the fleet had once hung. The battle was over, but the silence that followed was heavier than the roar of war. Across the Orion systems, transmissions faltered and fell quiet as the Vereen Empire struggled to comprehend what had happened. An entire civilization built upon control had been rewritten in a single heartbeat. Malik awoke to faint light and the scent of burned air. He lay on the cracked floor of the command hub, his body aching, his mind disoriented. For a moment, he thought the world was gone. Then he heard it, soft, steady, alive, the rhythm, a pulse. Vishara stood nearby, her form outlined by flickering light. Her once polished armor was scorched, her eyes dim but steady. "You're alive," she said, voice rough but warm. He managed a faint grin. "I told you I'm hard to kill." She knelt beside him. "The Empress is gone. The fleet, what remains of it, is scattered. They are leaderless." Malik sat up slowly. "Leaderless isn't the same as free." "No," she said. "But it is the beginning." Outside, the surviving humans and Vereen emerged from shelters, their faces a mix of wonder and fear. Soldiers who had once enslaved, now stood bewildered, hands trembling as they felt emotion ripple through their veins for the first time. Children cried openly. Elders reached for one another without knowing why. Vishara stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city. "They look at me as if I am both savior and curse," she whispered. Malik joined her. "They're just trying to figure out what comes next. We all are." The colony leaders gathered soon after. Mother Abeni, her face still streaked with soot, addressed them both. "You've torn down an empire," she said. "Now you have to decide what to build in its place." Malik looked at Vishara. "You're the one they'll follow." She shook her head. "They will not follow a tyrant's blood." "Then don't be one," he said simply. Her gaze held his. "You believe I can lead them?" "I believe you already have," he replied. "You showed them what it means to feel, to choose." She turned away, struggling against the weight of her past. "The Vereen will never trust humans." "Not fully." Malik crossed his arms. "Maybe they don't need to. Trust doesn't start with a crowd. It starts with two people, and we've already done the hard part." Vishara's lips curved faintly. "The kiss." He nodded. "And everything after." In the following days, Vishara reached out across the Orion network, transmitting not commands but invitations. Her message was simple. The time of silence was over. The Vereen and humanity would rebuild together under something new, the Pulse Accord, named after the rhythm that had united them in defiance of extinction. Some refused, others listened, and for the first time in centuries, the Empire's communication grid carried not orders but voices, songs, arguments, laughter. Malik spent his nights among the colonists, teaching the young Vereen to understand rhythm, to let their bodies move without permission. At first they stumbled, awkward and uncertain, but soon the beat caught hold. Vishara often watched from a distance. Each time she saw their movements, those hesitant steps turning into dance, something inside her loosened. One evening she approached him. "I do not understand how your people turn pain into joy." He smiled. "Because we have to, otherwise pain wins." She looked at the sky, now streaked with gold and red. "And when the joy fades?" "Then we start the song again," he said. The wind carried faint echoes of music from the city below. Vishara closed her eyes, feeling its rhythm align with her heartbeat. "Perhaps," she said softly, "this is what freedom sounds like." Malik nodded. "It's the sound of something new being born." And together they listened as the pulse of a new era began to rise. Years had passed since the fall of the Vereen Dominion, and the world that rose from its ashes pulsed with new rhythm. The stars that once marked the borders of oppression now connected a network of free worlds, their communication alive with voices, laughter, and song. The old silence was gone, replaced by something deeper, something human. In the heart of this reborn system stood New Timbuktu, no longer a colony, but the capital of the Pulse Accord. Its streets shimmered beneath twin suns, its buildings carved from the fusion of human creativity and Vereen precision. Music echoed from every level of the city, blending beats of ancient drums with the crystalline resonance of alien instruments. Malik Carter walked through the grand square, the weight of years softening the sharp edges of his once rebellious energy. Time had streaked his hair with silver, but his eyes remained steady, the same deep warmth that had carried him through captivity, exile, and revolution. People nodded as he passed, some human, some Vereen, many both. He paused before a monument that rose from the center of the square, two hands, one human, one alien, woven together in crystal and bronze. At their meeting point, a faint pulse of light flickered in time with the city's rhythm. Below the monument, an inscription read, "From silence, a song." Behind him, a familiar voice spoke. "They remember, Malik." He turned. Vishara stood there, regal as ever. Though her posture was softer now, her silver eyes warmer, the Duchess of Ice was long gone. In her place stood something new, something freer. "They remember us," he said, "though I still think they made my hair look too perfect in that statue." Her lips curved. "Modesty was never your strength. Neither was restraint. They stood together for a moment, watching children play near the monument, Vereen and human alike, their laughter mingling in a sound neither species could have made alone. Vishara spoke quietly. "The council meets tonight. The first generation of born hybrids will take their oaths. You should be there." "I will," Malik said. "But before that I wanted to see this." He looked up at the monument again, his expression distant. "You ever think about that day? The kiss?" She nodded. "Every day. It destroyed everything I knew and gave me everything I needed to begin again." He smiled. "You changed the Empire with that kiss." Her gaze softened. "We changed it." A group of students approached, young and eager, carrying small recorders and data pads. One of them, a girl with dark skin and silver markings along her temples, bowed slightly. "Master Carter, Duchess Vishara, we're collecting stories from the beginning. Could you tell us how it started, the first moment?" Vishara looked at Malik. He met her eyes and chuckled softly. "You really want to know how it started?" The girl nodded, eyes bright. Malik leaned forward slightly, his voice low, steady, carrying the rhythm that had once moved a galaxy. "It started with silence, with a man in chains, and a woman who had forgotten how to feel. And when that silence finally broke," he glanced at Vishara, "the whole universe listened." The girl's recorder blinked, saving every word. "What did it feel like?" she asked. Vishara's answer came after a pause. "Like stepping into light after centuries of darkness. Like realizing that control was not strength, and that emotion was not weakness." Malik added softly, "Like finding out that freedom doesn't begin with war. It begins with connection." The students thanked them and left, their footsteps fading into the hum of the city. Vishara turned to him, her voice quieter now. "Do you ever regret it? What we lost?" He shook his head. "We didn't lose anything. We just made room for something better." The suns dipped low, painting the city in golden shadow. Vishara looked at him one last time. "Then tell me, Malik Carter, how does the story end?" He smiled. "It doesn't. It keeps beating." And as the light faded, their hands met once more. The same touch that had once broken an empire, now the pulse of everything that followed.